forming or have formed an attachment to those machines. And I don't have to tell you how that feels at times. You get that, oh, what have I done with my phone?
Yeah. Oh my God.
It's a piece of tea, but we have a deep connection and a deep need for that. We live in an era that is now called post-truth.
Yeah.
We don't know what's real anymore, and we don't know what's true anymore. We are inundated with information. We are stimulating instead of regulating. We are hyper-connected. And so it's very difficult to know what's what. It is central to understand this as transactional analysts. We must understand this phenomenon. We must familiarize ourselves with this.
This is the Transactional Analysis Podcast. Conversations on the theory, application, and spirit of TA. Co-hosted by Parul Arora and myself, Matt Taylor. Sponsored by the International Transactional Analysis Association and the European Association for Transactional Analysis. In this episode, we speak with Ronen Stilman, a teaching and supervising transactional analyst in the psychotherapy field. We discuss the impact of technology, the significance of our relationship with tech, and how it shapes the way we relate and identify. We also discuss attachment and dependency, as well as the potential impact on relationships and what TA might have to say on this important matter. Ronen, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. Perhaps you could go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, your roles, responsibilities, that kind of thing.
Thank you for having me, and it's lovely to meet you, Martin Peru. So, my name is Ronen Stilman. I live and work in Edinburgh. I have a private practice. I'm a TSTA in psychotherapy. I suppose in my previous professional life, I worked in high tech and organizational change. And so I think in systems.
Okay.
Human system, societal systems, political system. That's the frame that I use. And I think of transactional analysis as also having a systemic frame. Eric Berne developed his ideas in the context of groups and systems.
Yeah.
And I also think that currently in transactional analysis, I think we are sort of moving from an ego-centric theory that is focused on the individual to an eco-centric theory. That's something that Adrian Lee talked about in her keynote just last week, celebrating 50 years of transactional analysis in the UK.
Yeah.
So it's this idea that we're moving away from the individual as at the center to the wider systems, the others. So whether it's people who have been alienated, whether it is the earth, ecology, or whether it's spiritual. So sort of things that are bigger than us.
Yeah.
So I think that's a more contemporary frame for transactional analysis.
Okay.
And in terms of how I got into TA, I moved into the UK. I'm originally from Israel. I was born in Israel. I moved into the UK in my late 20s. Okay. And I was an immigrant. And I suppose part of resolving my struggle with my new identity, with figuring out who I am and where I belong, I got into a therapeutic process. And through the therapeutic process, I heard about TA, went and did a 101. That was it. That was me.
Fell in love.
And the rest is history. So, yeah.
Great. And so, though you're interested in systems, you are a psychotherapist and you're a TSTA, a trainer and supervisor. How long ago did you come across TA?
I did my 101 in 2005.
Okay. So that's 19 years. Wow. Okay. A good bit of experience.
Yeah, it's a bit scary when you put it like that.
So this episode is going to be one of our special theme episodes, and I'm really excited about this conversation because, as you said, your background is in technology, and having had all the training that you've had as well, you wanted to talk about the idea of our relationship with technology and how it shapes the way we relate and identify. And I know you've written a lot about this. I've read a little bit of what you've written. And so what is it that you think is important for us as a TA community and anybody listening who might be interested in transactional analysis in terms of technology, how we're using it, and the effects that it's having on us as a community?
So I guess these ideas when I was a trainee, I also became a dad.
Yeah.
So these two things happen at the same time. And so I've learned about attachment theory and child development as I was becoming a dad. And so when I certified, my kids were starting to get a bit bigger. And at that time, technology really became very, very present and part of the day-to-day life. And so I have observed my children's development and their relationship with technology, as well as my own and how it affects my environment. And so I was very curious about what I was seeing. There was something pretty remarkable about what I was seeing, but I couldn't quite formulate or conceptualize it. And so I came up with this writer called Klaus Schwab, who talked about the 4 industrial revolutions that transformed the world around us. So we all know about the steam engine and mass production, but then he talked about digital technology and the current 4th industrial revolution, which is a combination of hardware, software, and biology.
Okay.
So how do we combine biology, us as humans, hardware and software? And I thought, ooh, that's a pretty funky idea. And so there is something about the interface, our connectivity, our sort of proximity and closeness, the close, very intimate interaction that we have with sensory-based technology. Our phones, our tablets, Amazon, Alexa's, ChatGPT, call it whatever you like. That I really believe is the biggest shift in human history. It's just the biggest shift in human history. I think it challenges our understanding of reality, of human consciousness, of humanistic script around freedom and choice, embodiment, for example, ideas around mortality. If I download my brain into a computer, does that mean I'm never going to die? It really pushes the limits of our understanding of humanity, and we are a humanistic modality. So I started really playing with these ideas of trying to work out how do I understand what is going on. As transactional analysts, if you like, the spirit of transactional analysis is that we are interested in transactions, which is the sort of basic unit of social discourse. That's the definition by Eric Berne. So how we interact and how we relate and how that shapes our identity. And so I started applying these ideas into what I was observing in terms of our transactions with technology.
There is something that is very similar to the significance of place that was introduced through transactional analysis. And you're talking about our dynamic or our relationship with technology being also very significant. And I think that's a really important idea.
And, even in that also is getting challenged, because is the virtual space as significant? Do we privilege virtual space, or if you like, physical space over virtual space? What is the significance of virtual space in our lives? What's the impact of being part of a virtual space on our embodied, if you like, or corporeal space? There's some big philosophical questions that I think we don't have answers to at the moment. This is all very new. The internet is 20 years old. The iPhone is just over 10 years old, yet it's everywhere.
It's funny you say that. I was with my son today, he's 25, and I said to him, have a look around, look at where everybody's attention is. And if you go into a public space now, if we were transported, I'm in my 50s, if I was transported as a teenager into the current world, I would wonder what was wrong, why we're looking down or looking at these black objects. And I don't know whether this is accurate, but I came across somebody writing about a study that was done where a rectangular black box was placed in front of the face of a child. And I believe the child was under 1 year old, and the child responded to the black box by smiling. And just the subtlety of that prevalence of people using iPhones to take photos and videos, and how it's just become smoke in the room. It is subtly come in, and we've not noticed the significance or not paid attention to it. And I'm wondering whether you've formulated for yourself any answers around how to approach the use of technology or considerations that you think are important for TA practitioners in particular.
Oh, there's lots of things, I think, but predominantly is that we need to understand our relationship with technology.
Okay.
We need to account for the significance of this change and the impact that it has on the way that humans relate and identify in order to work with it.
Yeah.
So this is such a vastly rich area, and there is this. We're not going to cover this in
We're not, are we?
45 minutes.
Mm.
I hours of workshops and written material about this. But I suppose if we start with a key, with a starting point for this, I guess is, I suppose maybe I'll tell you a story.
Okay.
Which I wrote about in the first article that I published on the subject, which is how I came about to think about this. Which is I was in a mall, in a shopping center, and I have this thing that's part of my heritage. I like to sit in cafes and look at people.
Okay.
I can spend hours doing that. And so I was doing that, and I was noticing this. There was this fruit juice in front of a juice bar.
Okay. Yeah.
In front of me, and there was a mother standing on the juice bar drinking a shake, and there was a buggy next to it with a baby. And she was drinking her juice and holding the phone to the face of her baby. And the baby was quiet and contained and what we would call regulated.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they didn't need any further input or attention or stimulation. They were contained. They had all that they needed.
Mm.
And that got me thinking about attachment. Yeah. And that got me thinking about how that interaction between the baby and the machine provided the baby what they needed to feel safe and secure. Attachment is a fundamental process in human development.
Yeah.
Our language of attachment is sensory based. It's voice, eye contact, and touch.
Yeah.
If you think about how we interact with phones, with Alexas, with ChatGPT, it's eye contact, touch, and voice. So these sensory-based devices have hacked, if you like, our pattern of attachment. We interact with them in these machines in the same way that we interact with humans. And so that means that we are forming or have formed an attachment to those machines. And I don't have to tell you how that feels at times. You get that, oh, what have I done with my phone?
Yeah. Oh my God.
I mean, it's a piece of tin.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we have a deep connection and a deep need for that. I have a question for you, both of you. What is the first thing that you do touch when you get up in the morning?
Oh man, yes. It's the phone, right?
What is the last thing that you do before you close the light and go to sleep?
It's the phone.
Plug my phone in.
Put it on charging.
If you think about the amount of times that you touch your phone or your computer or interact with them, think about the amount of time that the amount of transactions that you have with your phones, and think about if this was a human, how significant will they be in your life?
Wow. Yeah,
Wow.
that's really powerful.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is really powerful. We have a deep connection to these machines. And so the distance between biology and hardware and software has closed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And hence,
I often see now the mobile phone has become like an addendum. It's like the external brain. I remember being a kid and being able to remember probably 50 telephone numbers, and I've outsourced that now. I can remember a handful, and I'm reliant on this piece of tech, and I'm reliant on this piece of tech being connected to, the internet in some way in order for it to provide me with some of the stuff that I used to do using my own biological tech. So I think what you're saying about the attachment, and also what comes to mind for me is the idea of cost, that our resources are limited, time, energy, and materials. And how much when you asked that question, I thought, how much am I investing into this attachment?
It's making me think about this movie where, a person falls in love with their AI assistant, right?
Yes, her.
Her, right.
That's right.
Yeah.
And when you said that if this was a person, how significant would that relationship be? It's easy to see that happening when you talk about the three things about, the touch, the acceptance, and the dependency. And I wonder how that is impacting relationships, because like you said, Matt, that there is this another thing there all the time, right? And appendix or something. So how does that work in relationships? Because there's this other always there that kind of distracts you with a message, or it kind of is between you when you're sitting in front of someone and you pick up your phone to watch something or respond to a text. What's happening to relationships because of this?
So I guess one of the things another idea that I really like is this idea of the dialectics of progress. So when we experience progress in technology, there is a good thing and a bad thing. For example, we invented the wheel. The wheel allowed us to invent cars. Cars allowed us to travel, but they also created emissions and road accidents.
Yeah.
We are just in the beginning of the process of understanding the good and the bad, or the light and the shadow, if we were to go a bit Jungian about this.
Yeah.
So when it comes to relationships, what you've described, Paul, is what Esther Perel calls ambiguous loss. So ambiguous loss is when I think that I'm with you, but I'm not sure that you are. So I have this ambiguous sense of, are you with me or you're not with me? Are we connected or are we not connected? Yeah.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
That is so fascinating. And when you say, are you with me? Are you not with me? It's so obvious. Have you noticed sometimes when you're on a call and someone has dropped off, or you're not sure they can hear you, and the anxiety with which you say, are you there? Can you hear me? Imagine having that in a relationship, a lot of the times without verbalizing it.
The flip side to it is that what the current technology is allowing us is it's really created a sort of, not completely, but a sort of borderless world where any physical limitation is removed, whether it's borders, whether it's access, whether it's really removed a lot of the physical limitations that we have in order to be able to connect. I mean, look at you and me, Parul. You're in a different continent.
Yeah.
Our capacity to make contact is allowed or is afforded by this technology. So on one hand, it impacts the immediate presence of relationships in the physical here and now, but it also allows me to make contact and to access people that I won't have necessarily access to, that might be like-minded. People who are alienated and isolated can find their own tribes. Like thinking of people, for example, from ostracized communities, political activists who can't really speak to people freely. There's a light and a shadow to this.
Yes.
So I suppose one of the most, I think, important things in terms of impact, I think, to sort of our own process, if you like, is that one of the things I think has happened or is happening or has been happening with a sort of advent of omnipresent sensory-based technology is that we are learning to stimulate rather than regulate. Okay. So if you think about that moment where you've got nothing to do, or that you are in a situation where you don't know anyone, what is the first thing that you're doing?
It's so true, that bloody phone.
So whereas before, when we are faced that sort of awkward moment of either space in time or be confronted with our momentary sense of isolation, we would have to find a way to regulate, to either lean into the boredom and find something that occupies our attention, or if it's something to do with contact with others, then make contact with someone so that we assuage our existential angst of isolation. Now, we interact often, not everyone and not all the time, but we are more now conditioned to stimulate. So we will pick up a phone, we'll pick up a device, and we'll start interacting with that. So we are learning. Our capacity to regulate, I think, is being taken over by stimulation. We look for stimulation.
Right. Yeah.
And the limitation of that is obviously that our mind, our brain, our operating system, our nervous system can only stimulate to a certain extent before it gets tired.
Yeah.
Before we go into overwhelm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when we get into overwhelm, we are a bit numb. What happens is we get disconnected, either from ourselves, from others.
Yeah.
At the same time, we are very highly hyper-connected, and we are getting more and more disconnected from ourselves, from our embodiment, from others. Yeah, we see polarization. We see less contact in an intimate space because of ambiguous loss. So again, it's quite complex. Yeah.
Yeah. When you said that about dysregulation, what immediately came to mind for me was the idea that before phones, before the technology that we're talking about, when we experience that dysregulation, possibly the options were to be, as you said, to be with the discomfort and to hold that in awareness, in a healthy way. And then also we have our script process. TA talks about script, which is we find sometimes dysfunctional ways in order to handle that dysregulation. And I'm curious about your ideas of how script process or individuals and their own scripts are being influenced by technology and how technology is influencing script.
So I guess if we think about the contemporary definition of script as a relational process that is continuously co-constructed in relationship and fulfills the need for identity, then script, that if you think about that, a lot of that is happening also in a virtual space, then our identity in the virtual space correlates or is an extension or influences our identity in the corporeal space.
Right.
Okay, so in simple terms, how you identify and relate online in the virtual space has a significant impact on your day-to-day experience. For example, people have WhatsApp feuds, Twitter storms. People get cancelled on social media and their life is destroyed.
Yeah.
We have cyber trauma. So things that happened in a virtual space really impact our sort of life day to day.
Yeah.
The way that we find mating. So, I'm talking about dating apps, and now most people find their mate online first. So we have to figure out who we are in the virtual world, create some sort of a identity, curate some sort of an identity, and that shapes also how we see ourselves. Yeah. Or is a feedback loop between how we are in the physical world and how we are in the virtual world.
Yeah.
So our script, if you like, to go back to your question, manifests itself in both of these worlds, and they influence each other.
Yeah. Okay. One of the things you said just now that I was curious about, you said that we all interact with technology, and I'm curious about your thoughts about the individuals who don't have that availability, where technology is beyond their reach, say financially or because of the region of the world that they live in. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that and how that's influencing the dynamics between those who have and those who don't. And I know you've written a little bit about this.
Well, so there's multiple facets to this question. So I guess where I would start is if I go back to one of the comments you made earlier, that you feel that your devices are almost like an extension of you. And Christopher Wallace, one of the most influential psychoanalysts of our time, in his book, The Age of Bewilderness, talks about how technology has become a prosthetic, some sort of an extension of ourselves. And so if you do not have that, in some way you are disabled.
Okay.
So if I don't have access to some of those things, I might experience also some exclusion, because others can relate and can have access to that I can't. So I'm left, if you like, having to play with, I don't know, nature, whereas everybody else seems to be involved in something else. That's the one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is maybe it's better for their mental health, or I don't know. It's very difficult to talk about this, or I want to avoid talking about this in only good or only bad.
Yes.
I think we need to account for the extent of this phenomena that has both advantages and disadvantages. It has light and shadow.
Yes.
If we were truly to understand and work with this.
Yeah.
I find it really interesting how you talked about this disability, like the prosthetic part of it. That's such a powerful metaphor, actually. And we found that a lot during COVID, right? There was access for certain societies, certain levels of, in the society. And then there wasn't access, especially for students in school, etc., who couldn't afford technology or devices. And I wonder, therefore, is it really easy, or is it really possible to talk about this with the shadows and the light? It's becoming, it's coming together in a way that when you talk about digital natives, for instance, there are some people who might have greater access, and therefore, does that translate into greater privilege in this day and age?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we're talking about accessibility, and we're talking about resource. Yeah. So it's not new that resource is not equally distributed in the world.
Yeah.
This is another manifestation of that. And I suppose how I think about this probably is in terms of power dynamics. Yeah. So privilege and lack of privilege is about power and about who has the power and who decides and who defines and who has access and who doesn't have access. There's lots of really important questions around power and power dynamics that I think technology has raised. I mean, I'll give you just a couple of examples of that. For example, one of the very interesting things that have happened is in 2016, the UN have declared internet access as a human right.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a human right.
Wow, isn't that amazing?
I think that's
so fascinating.
That's telling something
Yeah.
about the extent and the centrality of technology in our existence.
Yes.
And one of the things I've been really wondering about is, so I've been really interested in the political implications of the rise of technology in the way that we talk about it now in terms of internet and hyperconnectivity. And of course, we see a world where there's been a massive increase in interconnectivity, but at the same time, quite a polarization of political discourse. And a similar process has happened when cinema became a technology. That gave rise to propaganda that was linked to the rise of Nazism, for example, or fascism in Europe.
Yeah.
And the rise of when the printing press was introduced, which allowed books, it was the prequel for the 100 Years' War in Europe. There is something about the rise of new technology and how it is leveraged by the powerful that impacts us not only at an individual level, but it impacts us at a political level. And we know that, for example, Trump used
Cambridge Analytica,
a company in the UK, Cambridge Analytica, to manipulate voters in the US election. So these are very powerful tools that hack our most basic operating system of attachment.
Yeah.
And so we are open to manipulation in a way that we have not been before.
That is so interesting. I really love the way you bring that back to attachment and how technology and the use of technology to propagate ideas can lead to attachment to ideologies and attachment to influencers or public figures, and how that is used as historically that media publishing has done. And now it's there constantly, people checking in with their phone throughout the day. The magnitude of the influence, I guess, has increased significantly.
Well, we live in an era that is now called post-truth.
Yeah.
We don't know what's real anymore, and we don't know what's true anymore. We are inundated with information. We are stimulating instead of regulating. We are hyper-connected. And so it's very difficult to know what's what.
Yeah.
Okay. So this being a TA podcast, what do you think TA has to say, or what theories are available to us as TA practitioners that are important in this significant and very complex matter? What have you identified that can benefit the start of a new discourse?
Lots.
I can imagine.
It's the short answer, but I'll give you a bit of an amuse-bouche, a bit of a taster of.
Yes, please do.
So one of the key ideas, or one of the basic ideas of transactional analysis, which is transactions, is the idea of ulterior transaction.
Ulterior.
Which is what is the psychological level of interaction.
Yeah.
So that allows us to both reflect and consider when we are relating through technology, what might be.
Could you possibly explain with a little more clarity what an ulterior transaction is?
So an ulterior transaction is when there is a transaction, an exchange, a social discourse between, say, two individuals.
Yeah.
That there is a communication on the social level. So what I say and what I hear and what I receive. But there is an underlying subtext that I kind of pick up, which is not said.
Yes.
Yeah? And so the third rule of communication that Byrne described is that the transactions, we transact in response to the ulterior rather than the social level. What is not said rather than what is said.
Yeah.
That's what we respond to.
Okay.
So we're really talking about influencing, manipulation, but also about what's communicated outside of our awareness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so as practitioners of TA, one of the things that I wrote a whole paper just about that, which is we really need to consider what our relationship with technology is, what our attaching style to technology is, because if we are frightened of it, if we don't like it, if we have a negative bias towards it, then that will impact the way that we interact with our either clients or coaches or trainees or supervisees when we're working online. So that's just a very practical example. One of the things that I also think is very useful to consider from a TA theory is the idea of co-creativity. So co-creativity is the idea that our reality is co-created. It means it's me and you, and we kind of come together to create something together, that we have a shared but not equal responsibility.
Yeah.
When I interact with you and you interact with me, we create something else. Yeah. And I suppose to think about the virtual space as a co-creative space. Yeah.
Okay.
When Freud started this crazy idea of therapy, he used to go and house visit people. And then that sort of stopped. And then it became that people came to our spaces, to our practice. But because of COVID and because of the rise of applications, video applications, we now can have insight into other people's houses. And they also get a bit of an insight to ours, so it flattens the power dynamic.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So there's a lot to attend. There's a lot to attend there. And, again, I think of TA as a systemic theory. Yeah. We are very much interested, especially in recent times, in ideas of inclusion and exclusion and privilege. We've talked a little bit about this. So being aware of the power dynamics that can take place as a result of the use of technology. Who has the power? Who doesn't have the power? Who has access? Who doesn't have access?
Yeah.
Who is in a privileged position? Who is alienated?
Yeah.
It's very helpful in attending and calling out power dynamics.
Yeah.
So that's just a very broad brush.
Great.
But as you can see, there's so much in this. I mean, I a lot more than I can say about this, but it's just let's start a primer.
I'm curious about something you said at a different point and how you're talking about it now. You talked about the collective and the co-creative, and you also talked about, before the podcast, in some of the other discussions, you talked about focus on hyper-individualism. And I wonder, when we talk about this space, how do the two get balanced, if at all, and do they need to? And also you talked about script a little bit. So how is our expression in this space changing? Because it's co-creative, like you said. So is it changing how we are positioning ourselves in the virtual world versus real world? And does that say something about our expression and identity, therefore?
So, I mean, the short answer is yes. And it has both positive and negative, or, again, it is such a complex phenomena.
Yeah.
Attachment is a complex phenomena. Attachment is not good. Attachment can be good and can be bad. It can create a very important sense of safety and security, but also quite a sense of insecurity and lack of safety and trauma and disorganization and anxiety and fear. It's both.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the bit that I really wonder. I can't stress enough. Because this is new, we have a tendency to sort of split into this is good or this is this is right or this is wrong. And what I'm saying is it is both.
Yeah.
And it's new. And it's going to take some time for us to fully understand the full implication of that, but that it has a fundamental impact on the way that we identify.
Yeah.
It has a fundamental impact on the way that we relate. It has a fundamental impact on the way that we form relationship. It has a fundamental impact on the politics of our current societies. Is so visible. And so as such a powerful phenomena, we have to talk about this. We have to research it. We have to understand this, because it is one of the biggest things that have happened in human history.
Great.
That's really what I keep coming back to.
Yeah.
This is not a small piece of thing that we can cover in a few conversations. This is huge.
Yeah.
Absolutely huge.
Yeah. And I'm looking at the time and recognizing that we're kind of coming towards the end of this discussion, feeling like we've barely scratched the surface. And so I want to ask, I guess in closing, what do we need to do as a community, TA community, or as individuals? Because you've spent time considering this. What do you think needs to happen in order for us to grow in awareness and to invest more of our resources into considering what I agree with is an incredibly complex and significant matter that is all around us? What are your ideas? What next?
And so, I'm going to use the TA concept that is a guiding map to this. If you think about the discounting matrix, discounting is the things that we sort of minimize its significance and importance. And then the discounting matrix talks about the first level of discounting is existence. We can't do anything with something we don't recognize that exists. And so the first step in this is to recognize the existence of this phenomenon. That it exists, that we are attached, that it is central to the way that we are currently operating and relating and identifying. Once you recognize that as a practitioner, then you go into the next level of the discounting metrics, which is significance. What is the significance of that? What is the significance of that to me? What is the significance of the way that I relate with the people who are close to me, with the people that I work with in my professional capacity, in the society that I operate in? Which leads me to consider what my options are and what my responsibility is.
Great. Nice.
And I think as a community, just to finish off, any conversation about the future of TA that does not talk about technology is a discount.
Great. I'm probably going to take that and use that phrase and maybe even use it as a little clip for the introduction to our episode, because I think that is a really important piece, something that we really need to think about and really need to focus on. I feel really enlivened and maybe a little bit overwhelmed having had this conversation. So I'd imagine I'm tapping into a lot of what you've been processing over time in your work in doing this.
Absolutely, Matt. I think it is such a, I've been writing a few articles about this, and it's almost always I get the same feedback when I publish a paper in the editorial process. The feedback is like, oof, this is hard, this is difficult, oof, this is overwhelming. Yeah, it is. It is, because it is so close. It is so uncomfortable, which in my opinion means it is central to understand this. As transactional analysts, we must understand this phenomenon. We must familiarize ourselves with this, because not only is it also very present, if you think about all the generations to come, my children and your children, all our future client base is steeped in this. And if we don't understand that, how are we going to work with this?
Amazing.
Great. Thank you. I just want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for this contribution. I think this is going to be a really important episode. And I think there's a possibility that we need to revisit this subject, possibly a panel discussion, more people around the table, and see where it leads. But Ronen, thank you so much for all the work that you've been doing in background that's led to this. And thank you for your time here today.
My pleasure.
Thank you. It was so interesting to listen to your thoughts and try and process all of the different facets and tangents of this. I really agree with you, Matt. This feels like we've just touched the surface.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
As always, if you found anything in today's episode interesting, please feel free to reach out. You can visit our website, which has lots of information and resources, tapodcast.com. You can connect with us on all major platforms such as Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And you can email us at info@tapodcast.com. If you aren't already, please follow us wherever you get your podcast from. And we would really appreciate a review on the platform you're listening on as well. It helps raise the profile of the podcast and TA. Thanks for listening.
Sponsored by the International Transactional Analysis Association. You can find more information on the ITAA at www.itaaworld.org and the European Association for Transactional Analysis. You can find more information on IATA at www.iatanews.org.